Hey there, welcome to my channel. Follow along with me as I show you my process of how I completed this painting, Peace Like a River. Okay, first of all, I use my old school projector and I transfer the image over to the canvas. Let's see how it looks there. It's an opaque projector. And I like to use this on my larger paintings that I do. This one is 48 inches by 36 inches. So I beam the image over to the canvas and I trace basically the specific areas of it. As you'll see here, I turn the light back on and I have the trees, where the water line is, a little bit of the rapids, some of the bushes, outlines of the trees. It is a very basic sketch. And when I turn the lights back on, I darken a few areas just so it's a little bit easier for me to see. Now, I don't really consider this tracing the image. It's mainly for me to get the proportions right and kind of and block everything in where the trees will go. It just gives me a head start. Saves me some time as far as drawing it freehand. I've drawn enough freehand stuff. I know I can do it. I'd rather just use a projector. Here I'm sealing with a final fixative. So this helps when I'm painting the image and it doesn't smudge, doesn't smear when it gets wet with paint or with water. I'm going to be using acrylic for this painting. And I don't necessarily hit the entire canvas, just a nice coating on the charcoal areas. All right, once I have the image sealed, I bring it back into the studio. I always seal it outside so the fumes aren't inside. I appreciate that. My wife appreciates that. My daughter appreciates that. Even my cat appreciates that. So here I'm blocking in color. I'm starting with the trees. And really they're just kind of I block it out as far as the road map so I can see where everything goes. If I do the branches first, basic road map, I know where the leaves are attached. And so then I know where the other trees go. I know where the bushes go. So I start with the trees first, just doing a few of the branches, a few of the trunks, and then I will start doing the rest of the painting. But I'll do the trees first. And this is a mixture of, I believe, burnt sienna and some black. And right now I just wanted a dark brown color. Really wasn't too concerned about color matching or anything like that. I'm using the photo as a reference. I'm not trying to duplicate the photograph. And there's a difference. I don't want to just make it look exactly like a photograph, because if it did look exactly like a photograph, I might as well just print out a photograph. Here I'm marking off the water line and filling in the river. I'm using a mixture of hooker green and black. And I've watered down the middle somewhat so it's lighter where the rapids are going to be. As I progress, I end up just covering this up because it really didn't work out the way I thought it was going to. And you'll see I just left a little bit for the tree area overlapping the water. Now I'm starting to block in the trees, the foliage, and I'm just getting the semblance of color, where the different shades are, the various types of trees. And this is very rough. I'm only trying to cover the entire canvas with paint right now. And then I can determine where the details go later on. But again, I'm only using what I traced onto the canvas as a very loose guide. All this stuff will probably change where the trees and the shrubs and the leaves and everything go. But but right now it's just a small indicator where everything's going to be. This is kind of the stage where I consider it the yuck stage. Every painting I do has a yuck stage. I don't like it. I don't think it looks very good. But once I finally keep working on it, it starts to shape up and looks a little better. So I'm progressively adding a little bit more detail. I'm adding more of the branches, more of the trees. So you can see the branches going here. And like I said, once I had the branches established where they're actually going to be, I know where the leaves are going to fall on those branches because leaves are attached to branches. And I did decide to add a little bit of highlight to the tree just to make it look more like a tree. I'll do that sometimes. But I do wait till later on in the progress of the painting before I start adding a lot of detail. All right, I'm painting in the sky here, and it's a very light gray. I didn't want it to be totally white. It is a cloudy day. Cloudy days are usually kind of gray clouds instead of white. And with the contrast of the darker greens that I will eventually have on this entire painting, a light gray will be more than enough in order to make the highlight and the focal white point at the top. All right, I'm adding some texture just with a simple sponge. This is I believe it was just black. There might have been a little bit of green in this as well. And I am just touching the sponge to add texture. Starts to look like leaves right away. See, I told you I was going to cover up the water because I didn't like it, so I did that there. Now, after I've done the texture to it, I add a glaze, which is just watered down black paint, maybe a little bit of green with that. I darken the entire thing because I want a nice contrast when I start adding the lighter leaves on top of this. And I end up doing 2 coats after the one dried. I did 2 total coats in order to get it to the level of darkness that I wanted on it. You know, Bob Ross always says in order to show light, you have to have dark. So we had to add a certain level of darkness. Okay, now I'm about to add the actual first starting of putting leaves on. And that's just going to be really just a few dots, a few strokes of the paintbrush all over the entire painting in order to start the first layer of leaves. And I'll vary the color of the leaves. I don't use the same color. I'll add a little bit of yellow, a little bit more green, maybe a little bit brown. Eventually there will be some orange and stronger yellow colors for the leaves that are actually changing. So I started off with a green that I didn't really like the color of, so I did add some yellow. And there's a tip that I found out after I had done some paintings that I never thought my trees looked that great. I never really liked the color. And I was using the paint color straight out of the tube or straight out of the bottle, whatever the case might be. And I found that it's always a little bit too green. And I got a tip from an artist somewhere. I don't remember her name, but she said that, add a little bit of yellow to your greens and it'll be a lot more realistic leaf color. And I started doing that, and I actually added a little bit of black so it wouldn't be quite as saturated. And I've had really good success with that. So that's a tip. Add a little bit of yellow, add a little bit of black to your greens, and you'll be amazed at how much more your trees have a actual more photographic look to them versus a cartoony look if you just use a green straight out of the bottle. Like I said, I add paint, little brush strokes for the leaves all over the entire painting. And I've added a little bit more yellow here, and I'm following the outlines of the trees. And if I go over the trees a little bit, that's fine. I can always paint the tree over, touch it up. But I'm trying to follow the outline of the leaves here. And it's fairly tedious You just keep plugging away. A little bit of paint here, a little bit of paint there, and you keep on keeping on. And so I'm satisfied with that area, and I keep moving on to a little bit more green, a little bit more yellow. And as I'm putting it on top of that texture layer that I did with the sponge, that sponge texture layer really looks like shadows of leaves in the background once you start painting on top of it. It's really a neat technique. And if you kind of smudge a little bit too much paint, you just push it around a little bit. You change the color a little bit here and there. You don't want all the same color. It looks more natural. You add a little bit of green, maybe a little bit more yellow, maybe a little bit more black. And so I will keep going with the rest of this painting, as you see what I'm doing here, a little bit at a time. And I might cover up some of the branches a little bit because I'll have leaves covering that. And this, I'm not really using a specific type of stroke. It's just kind of splashing it on, kind of like round, almost commas, I guess. That's kind of a known technique for doing leaves, the comma stroke. So I'm sort of doing that, sort of a mixture between a round, just a dot, and a comma stroke in order to try to get it. So I'm not going to show each leaf that I've painted, but you can see here that I've lightened it up a little bit. And it really is starting to shape up. I've added a little bit more leaves up in the upper right in the opening where the sky is. And I've applied a little bit of orange and yellow, and I'm putting a little bit of dark leaves as far as the shadow. I wanted that glow along the edges, but if there's too much glow, there's not enough dark. So again, like Bob Ross has said, in order to show off the light, you got to have a little bit of dark. And I continue working on this area, adding a little bit of leaves, sort of one at a time. It's probably ended up being like 5 or 6 at a time the way I'm doing this. And I'm doing the opening. I want that a little bit brighter. So I'm adding a little bit of orange. Kind of has a glowing look when I'm painting it against the open sky, and kind of has almost a blurry type of out of focus look. And I really liked the way that was shaping up. And I thought when I was all done that it looked pretty cool. Now I'm showing this in fast motion, of course, because it would be a very long, drawn out video doing it in regular time. So some of it's in regular time, some of it is sped up 2, 4, 8 times the amount of time that it took me to do. So I added a little bit of white or light gray, just showing a few openings in the leaves area in the background. And now I'm adding more to the tree. I'm getting some more details with it. Like I said, I will gradually increase the detail as I'm working. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of detail to the tree, maybe a lot. Right now it's just getting it so I have a feel for how it's actually going to look, how the shading's going to be, and where I'm going to add the extra leaves. And like I said, I'm loosely following the photo. A lot of it's based on what it looks like where the leaves are. But there's a few things where I just felt I needed to add color, maybe a little bit, extend it further than what the photograph shows. Composition wise, I just thought it would look better. So now I'm filling in really highlights along the bushes or the trees. And you can kind of see how if you just put a little bit on the top, it creates a ridge. And then you've got another ridge. It's kind of like if you imagine jumping through the ridges and jumping over them. But if you leave a little bit of darkness along with the light, you have a really neat effect. All right, now I brought the branches out because these are going to be extending over the water. And really this part of the river was in shadow and needs to be a little bit darker. So I'm darkening that part up. And yes, I did paint over one of the tree branches, but I just went right on top of it again. And with a pencil, I kind of drew out where I wanted these leaves, and I'm actually making them more of a leaf shape. Basically, the closer they get, the more you can see the shape of the leaf. And I'm not really sure what type of tree this was. Could have been a poplar. But a lot of trees have the shape of like a maple leaf, and that's what this was. It had that type of shape. So I'm individually painting them, not all to look exactly like a maple leaf, but they have sort of the hand shape to them and the points on it. Now I started with the orange here, and I decided there needed to be some shadow, so I went to orange on it right away. So I corrected it and added some darkness. And with the river, it was too green. It needed to have a little bit of brown to it because, let's face it, rivers are kind of brown color. They're not really green. There's a lot of foliage in here for green reflection, but there's also some, with the leaf colors, with the dirt mixed in the water, I needed some brown with it. Now, when I'm painting the lines of the rapids, I used a T-square to try to line it up to keep it straight. I didn't do that the entire way, but it just kind of kept it as a guide to get going because I didn't want them to be crooked. If they're not straight, it really would throw it off. So I'm making the current kind of curve just a little bit. So I'm making it go to the left a little bit, and then it comes back to the right. And I just play with the amount of strokes and kind of keep going with that to see how it looks. All right, I needed to add a few more leaves in this area. There's kind of a gap, and after I put the dark area down, I needed to repaint the autumn colored orange leaves. And I just wanted a few. It just kind of gives a little bit more of a contrast and pulls you into the center and to the right of the painting. And I decided I needed to add a little bit more of the rapids going to the right, so it looks like it curves a little bit more. All right, so at this point, the painting is almost completed, but now I evaluate it and see if there's anything else that I need to do on it. So at this point, I'm just going to add a few details. You can see what I'm doing, what I'm adding, and I'm going to finish it off with a little bit of music.